Rabbi Dov Lipman is one of the most interesting commentators on Israeli society, Israeli politics, and Israel's foreign relations. He was a member of the 19th Knesset and is now a senior manager on honestreporting.com. Rabbi Lipman, hey, how are you doing today? Rabbi Lipman?
Great to talk to you. Can you hear me?
Oh, now I can hear you. Yeah, okay. Well, before we get into the current political turbulence, could you tell us a little bit about honestreporting.com?
Absolutely. Honest reporting was started when it became very clear that the international media is just not being fair when it comes to Israel and is putting its bias in its reporting about news. So, Honest Reporting has editors that spend all day monitoring the international media. When they see an outright falsehood about Israel, they post it on Twitter, on Facebook. They call out the the newspaper or the website to correct it. We're also proactively telling Israel's story through a massive YouTube project and just working to make sure that the true story about Israel is told throughout the world.
Wow. Well, we can't emphasize how important that is nowadays when the media is such an important place for it's more important than a battlefield in some ways, and definitely with regards to everything on public relations and things like that. Okay, let's talk a little bit about politics. First of all, we were all fascinated by how slow the Supreme Court sessions advanced, right? I imagine you followed those closely.
I was listening the entire day,
Wow.
Sunday, Monday. I'll be honest with you. I was fascinated by it because I really think there's a lot of both sides during the elections were saying democracy is falling apart in Israel. Goodbye, democracy. And I think you saw the democratic process play out because you have elections, you have the legislative branch, they're trying to build the government branch, and then you have the courts. And the courts, from my perspective, were very fair, saying we're not here to get involved in politics. We're here to see are there any constitutional laws that are somehow being hurt in this process, and if not, we're not going to get involved. So it was a fascinating process to see the attorneys for all sides presenting their cases, being questioned by the 11 justices. It was entertaining and also a thrill to be part of.
Okay, well, I don't know. I think I was expecting something which is more like an episode of The Good Wife, but eventually we got an episode of, I don't know, Days of Our Lives or something like that. But yeah, it was interesting. But eventually, okay, so now we already have the ruling. Can you explain what exactly is the ruling? What did the Supreme Court decide to do?
Absolutely. And there are many who felt that the question about should Netanyahu be able to form a government while under indictment should not have even been brought to the court to begin with, because there is no law against it. In fact, the law is very clear that you can be prime minister while under indictment. And both left wing and right wing wrote that law together because they didn't want to have a situation where a prosecutor comes in with a political agenda and collapses a government by indicting a prime minister. So many thought it shouldn't have been there to begin with, but the justices ruled unanimously that both liberal judges and conservative judges that the prime minister is allowed to form a government while under indictment. That was ruling number one, which paved the way towards this unity government. And ruling number
That was
two,
the first session. That was the first major
that was
session.
Sunday, correct? And then Monday dealt with the actual coalition agreement itself. We're living in a historic moment where Netanyahu and Gantz, after 3 election campaigns, slinging mud at one another, saying the other one is not fit to be prime minister, are uniting together for the good of the country to make sure we don't go to a fourth election, bringing left and right together. And it's a very intricate coalition agreement, which creates a new position in Israel called vice prime minister, who has the standing of prime minister. Gantz will be that for the first 18 months, Netanyahu for the second 18 months. And there were complaints against the coalition agreement there as well. The justices asked for a few changes to be made to the agreement. Both sides came together and did so within 24 hours. And the court said, okay, at this point, the coalition agreement is good to go. And they've paved the way for this unity government. Now, there are some laws that were passed in order to form the government Now that they've passed, the justices said we'll take another look at it, but they're not going to stand in the way of the government being formed. So at this moment, based on those historic decisions, we are on a path now for a new government to be sworn in next Wednesday, with God's help, in Israel. And we'll put this whole 15-month political stalemate behind us and also enter a new era with a very wide-ranging unity government.
So we've already heard that Netanyahu actually has, I think, 72 Knesset members supporting his candidacy, let's say, for forming a government, right? But
And just to explain, the president gave the Knesset 21 days for a member of Knesset to come forward and say, I have a majority supporting me to form a government. Now that this unity deal has been worked out, as you said,
for which, by the way, the deadline is tonight.
Exactly.
Right?
On the last day, 12 a.m. tonight in Israel time,
Yeah.
that would have been an automatic fourth election. He sent to the president's office today 72 separate declarations signed by 72 separate members of Knesset saying we support Netanyahu. By the way, that includes Likud and most of the right-wing bloc and religious bloc, but also Blue and White and Labor, more towards the left. They all submitted those statements. The president's office said we are going to check every single one of them to make sure that we do have a verified 61, the majority. And then at that point, he will officially
the authenticity of the signatures. What exactly will they check? That no force was used when persuading
and no forgeries. They want to make sure that they're all actual signatures of those people who signed them. And then at that point, once it's verified, they will officially give Netanyahu the mandate to form a government. It could be 2 weeks process, but the prime minister wrote in his letter to the president that his plan is to come to a government by this coming Wednesday.
I see. And you mentioned the Supreme Court having some kind of I don't know, saying that the law, or not the law exactly, the coalition, the law that forms the unity government coalition might return back for additional ruling. Was there some kind of unrest in the Supreme Court with this agreement?
The Supreme Court feels that there are laws that they do have to look at. Just as an example, the vice prime minister will be allowed to serve while under indictment. That's a question mark. A prime minister can serve while under indictment, but not a minister. So they do want to look at these laws again. But I've spoken to a few scholars, constitutional scholars in Israel, and they said that the Supreme Court has never intervened on a basic law. These were all passed as basic laws that will be the foundation towards the Constitution. And therefore, it's unlikely that they will invalidate them. But either way, they said they will only look at those laws after the government is formed. So that makes it even more unlikely that they'll turn the clock backwards. And I think that Netanyahu and Gantz can sleep easy at night knowing that this government is going to be off and running.
Now, one other question with regards to Netanyahu. Can he use the mandate and form a different government, say a narrow right-wing government at this stage?
In theory, he could absolutely do that. He's not bound to keep to an agreement that he signed with Gantz. Had the Supreme Court intervened and picked away at the coalition agreement, that could have happened if he didn't feel comfortable with the agreement that he had with Gantz, because now the court had changed it. But now that the court has changed it, it's unlikely that Netanyahu will do so. I should mention there is a right-wing party, Yamina, led by Naftali Bennett, the current defense minister. At the moment, they are not part of the coalition. They did not sign these declarations that Netanyahu should form the government. So that's keeping the government at 72 instead of a possible 78 seats. The other remote possibility is at the last moment, Netanyahu somehow doesn't feel that it's going the right way and allows the country to go to a fourth election, in which the polls at the moment are saying Netanyahu would be able to form a right-wing government without any issues and wouldn't even need a unity government, with Likud exploding to more than 40 seats. Again, just from the inside and what I'm seeing at this point, it does not seem like we're heading in that direction. And I do really believe that we're on course for a new wide-ranging unity government next Wednesday.
Okay. And what will happen now to Prime Minister Netanyahu's trial? You mentioned that he is under indictment, right?
His trial is scheduled to start at the end of May. And he has said, I'll do what I have to do to be able to be prime minister while in trial. And again, don't forget, blue and white, that was their major campaign issue was, how can we have a prime minister in the security cabinet and also worrying about court? But now they've joined hands together, and he'll have to manage both together. Netanyahu's trial could take 2-3 years, over 300 witnesses. So this could last throughout this entire government. And I've been saying all along, people have asked me, do you think he's guilty? Do you think he's innocent? I have no idea. That's why we have a court. That's why we have judges. That's why we'll have witnesses. And the court will decide. And whatever the court decides will be the final conclusion. But until a decision is made that he's guilty, he can serve as prime minister. And according to the new law they passed, as vice prime minister as well, when Benny Gantz becomes the prime minister in the rotation agreement.
Yes, and technically the Supreme Court already approved that. It will not need another look by the Supreme Court because they have already ruled about it.
They ruled that he could be prime minister. They have indicated they will look into this vice prime minister angle, but again, it was put as a basic law that there's a new position called the vice prime minister with the status of a prime minister. It's very unlikely that once this government has been agreed to and sworn in as a basic law that they would interfere at that point.
Now, Rabbi Lipman, I know you don't have a crystal ball, but I still want to ask, if sworn in, how long do you think that this unity government will last?
It's really hard to tell exactly what the dynamic will be like between Netanyahu and Gantz, between the Likud bloc and the blue and white bloc. There was an interest for both of them to keep this government going for a significant period of time. The real question mark is going to be as we start getting towards the 18 months when Netanyahu will have to turn it over to Benny Gantz. Will something happen at that point to collapse the government and go to an election? And there are parties in the opposition that have said they will join with Likud to make that happen. There were many mechanisms put into the coalition agreement to prevent that from happening and to ensure that Gantz does become the prime minister. I believe there's a significant chance of this lasting for a significant period of time, and hopefully ministers in positions where they can govern and make changes for the benefit of the country for the 3 or 4 years, depending on what they decide that the government should last.
Yeah, well, you have a personal encounter with Prime Minister Netanyahu and with Gantz, so you know these people pretty well. Can they work together after all we've been through in the last 3 campaigns?
It's a great question. One of the things that I've been saying throughout the election, I've been telling people, politics is politics. These are two men who ran a war together in the summer of 2014. They know each other well. When people were shocked to see them signing an agreement together, it was not a shock for me at all. When I was a member of Knesset, Benny Gantz was the chief of staff. He was in the Knesset regularly. I saw these two men working together. I do believe they can work together. They were, listen, politics, you accuse others of all kinds of things, and that's what campaigns are about. And then when the campaign is over, you start thinking about what is best for Israel. And I want to say, I personally am very impressed with both of them for saying the best thing for Israel right now is no more elections, a unity government. We have to deal with this coronavirus crisis, which is both health and now economic issues that Israel is dealing with. And the time has come to try to bring as many sides of Israel together in unity to govern. Both of them had to swallow a lot. Both of them had to compromise a lot to do that. And I applaud them both for taking this bold action.
Yeah, well, you've shed some light on the dark side of politics. I want to ask you one last thing, not regarding, kind of regarding to politics. We all heard that U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is going to conduct a real speed visit here in Israel. And my question is, as far as you know, will he promote or even give a green light for the annexation of the Jordan Valley?
It does look like there's going to be some kind of movement on the issue of whether it's the Jordan Valley or other areas of the West Bank. We'll see. That was one of the biggest things that Benny Gantz had to compromise on and joining the government with Netanyahu, because they're not planning on doing any earth-shattering legislation during the first number of months as they manage the corona issues. But they did agree that starting July 1st, there could be a process of annexation of sovereignty. What exactly it will be at the end of the story, we'll have to see. Yamina, the right-wing party, is holding out of the government partially because they're not happy with the limited scope that this might be, but there is absolutely working together constantly between Netanyahu and the U.S. president, the White House, on these issues. And there's no doubt that this visit is to try to figure out exactly what will they annex, what will they put sovereignty on, what can they move forward with to take advantage of this opportunity of a wide-ranging Israeli government and Trump in the White House to get something done on this front. And we'll definitely be seeing news made one way or another.
Okay, well, former Knesset member and senior manager at honestreporting.com, Rabbi Dov Lipman, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for all the great work that you're doing to tell the world about Israel.
Well, you too. Thank you.